If we're all within the same one unit of consciousness, it's all connected into consciousness. So there's a connection into non-local intelligence, non-local awareness that you can then have as an indelible connection into the ether, whatever words you want to put to these things. There's a way to dip into that and access that in a real beneficial way that makes a real impact on the world. The conscious connection that you could make into things that are maybe connected with the non-human intelligence, etc. The ET stuff, there's a scientific basis to be able to reach out into that ether. But let's look at this logically.
Yeah, right.
Either gravitational propulsion and gravitation experimentation failed and they dropped it all and we've just ignored it forever since then, or we solved it and it went black. I fully believe that we have a fleet of ships. And there are other reasons that I believe this as well. I fully believe that we have a complete fleet of ships flying around and defending our area of the solar system.
Wow. Sean, our first mind meld was a lot of fun. I feel like we're kindred spirits in so many ways. But then, as we talked about after, there were so many things that we didn't even get a chance to touch on, because that initial story you told of your kind of personal awakening is such a captivating story. And to tell it properly, you really need a dedicated chunk of time. But man, I'm super excited to dip back in for round 2, because there's I know you got some heaters stored away whatever orifice you store the heaters, whatever quantum psychical orifice you hide the heaters in. I know you got them.
Yeah. Well, I try to be entertaining, if not educational. So I store those things away and pull them out whenever they become prescient to the conversation. But yeah, I love our conversations, and it's an honor to be back with you and chat and hang out and talk about all this cool stuff that we all love. And these podcasts that can be recorded and watched forever is amazing.
Me too, man. If it's possible, do you want to do like the in a nutshell recap of what happened to you? Because I feel like it is a good lubrication into the conversation to sort of let people know where you're coming from.
Right. Okay. So yeah, the gist of it was I had a successful life in business, et cetera, and was doing all the right things to get the American dream all lined up, et cetera. And then I got there, and then I realized I wasn't happy. So I started doing a bunch more introspection, a lot more reading about what I might be missing within, and learned about this meditation thing from D.T. Suzuki's book, Introduction to Zen, and figured out, all I knew was there was this thing called Satori, which is the moment that a Zen practitioner can have an immediate understanding of everything in the universe, and then it answers all their questions, and then they become this thing called enlightened, and yada, yada, yada. And I didn't understand any of it besides the words that had been assembled in that book to put that together for people to understand. Mm-hmm. So then I started practicing, and within a short amount of time, there was a physiological reaction within my body and within my consciousness that yanked me out of my existence, yanked me out of my body, basically. And there's a lot of detail to that whole process, et cetera, but we're encapsulating it here in a short amount of time. So yanked me out of that, sent me into the center of the universe with a consciousness that seemed universal love, infinite intelligence, infinite wisdom, yada, 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 and shared with me how everything worked, which was amazing. And I was gone so long in that experience, seeing and doing the universe, that I forgot I was a human named Sean. Like, I had literally thought that I had died and gone off to what people would consider heaven. And it was everything. And I understood everything. And it's all of everything that Zen and enlightenment and all of the, like, if you even study Christianity, the earliest forms of Christianity, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, are all about meditating to find theosis. And through beatific visions, which are the things that you see in your mind that God is putting in there for you to
Mhm.
understand all this stuff. Like, this is the basis of Christianity. It's the basis of Buddhism. It's the basis of Zen. It's the basis of absolutely everything.
Yeah.
If you want to poo-poo on internal religion or internal vision, you're poo-pooing your religion that you're attached to, period, because all of them are based upon these internal epiphanies of the saints that help then form those religions. And so I had that whole thing, and I started coming back. They were like, "Oh, you got to go back." And I was like, "Go back to what?" And they were like, "Well, go back to Earth." And then I thought, "Oh, well, I got to go be a new baby. Maybe I got to go do another human life cycle." And I was like, "Well, that answers the reincarnation thing." And no, I was going back to my body in my bedroom where I'd left off thousands of years ago in meditation. I was like, "Oh, hell no." I was like super disappointed with that news, that I was coming back to be this train wreck. And so then I started negotiating. I'm not going back there without bringing something of value back. And that's when the whole discussion started of, well, what do you want? What do you want to take back with you to deliver to the world? Because that'll be your responsibility now. And I was like, well, give me this pain and suffering thing. And then they're all like, well, we gave that to a whole bunch of people, and you see what you guys have done with it. And I was like, well, we have mass communication technologies now and one-to-many capabilities. Give it to me anyway. And so that then became the basis of the books that I wrote, that are highly reviewed, at least, on being able to explain the process of pain and suffering in the human mind, how you can then short circuit that process, take a hold of the complex machine that causes your pain and suffering, break something in there so that process breaks within you, so where your pain and suffering can go away. Like, it's a really practical explanation of all of the esoteric wisdom that you wind up getting dumped into you. And then the second book was an explanation of the process and the science of spiritual enlightenment. And then the third book was what people have done with dipping into non-local consciousness, because we're starting to put scientific terms around these things. We're starting to study these things so that we can get a better handle and a grasp on understanding how they work in the physics of the universe. And so the third book was all about what people can do when they then get to dip into non-local consciousness and access that place of knowing, which ironically is your inner knowing, because you have to go within to get out and get through into infinity, and then you have access to the whole thing. So that's kind of what happened and what started this whole shift in my life, away from chasing the American dream and climbing the corporate ladder to, being a right-leaning, gun-owning, conservative type of guy, to be wanting to go outside and let my grass grow to as tall as it wanted to, and hug all my trees, and not, still have a gun to scare people away, but not necessarily shoot them, right? So it's like
Yeah.
a complete shift, and I think it was within a couple of hours. Like, I think the meditation only lasted probably 45 minutes to 2 hours, because it started right when the sun was above the horizon, and when I came out, I was bawling. My body was sobbing for hours, seemingly, because my pillow, it's like it felt like you threw it in the lake. It was soaked all the way through
Hmm.
with tears. And I came back and the sun was down. So I don't know how long the meditation occurred,
Yeah.
but I was surprised I was still that human named Sean when I came back. It was like, I was gone, off experiencing, doing, controlling the universe for that long before being sent back here with the stuff that eventually became the mind hacking happiness stuff, and now emotional intelligence and theory of mind for AI. Lot of amazing, cool, tangible benefits came back from that experience, which makes all of these conversations super interesting now, because it's like, okay, it's more than just a nice, happy fever dream that
Right.
whole experience started with. I came back with new science, and we're changing the world with it. Okay,
Yeah, man.
that's interesting. Let's talk about that more, and let's get more people involved with that. Let's get more people active in that. Let's get more people experiencing that if we can, because I'm bright, but I'm not like, Eric Weinstein bright. Like, get
Right.
him into that space, and we're going to solve a bunch of cool stuff. Like,
Yeah, man. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and there's three or four really huge roads that spring from that beautiful story of archetypal awakening that you had. One is that you zeroed in on one of the things that I think is absolutely true, is that I don't like making clear dichotomies between things, or sweeping statements about spiritual paths. But I do think that there is one dichotomy that I would argue exists, and it's sort of this dichotomy between the mystical types of spirituality and the esoteric types of spirituality and the exoteric, right? Where you're passive, you're going to a more organized religious setting, but you're not ever having that internal experience of the sacred, of whatever you want to call it. And
Yeah.
that exists throughout all spiritual disciplines. And I think that that is more important than whatever ist or ism you call yourself. Like, I think that's more important than if you call yourself a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever, because to me it says so much more about what you even put in the horizon of your possibilities to experience, knowing that you are willing to explore your own psyche, look through your own inner telescope. Like that to me says more than any of those titles says, because I really do. So I've been reading on and off. I've been reading a fantastic book by Gregory Shaw, who's a scholar of Neoplatonism, called Hellenic Tantra. And he talks about how when, institutionalized sort of Roman Christianity started to stomp out all of these, mystical traditions and co-opt a lot of their things in a lot of cases, a lot of their philosophical points, at least. But one of the things that happened is they took all of the sacred out of the personal experience and out of the world, where in these old mystery schools, like everything in the world was a portal to some kind of divinity in almost like a shamanistic way. Like the plants had a spirit, and that spirit was part of this like chain of being that extended up to some kind of divinity, and then that divinity emanated out from a central oneness, and that central oneness is still endemic within all of us, and that's still our portal to experience like the mysterium tremendum and all of that stuff. And I'm just saying this to illustrate the fact that you can either look at things that way broadly, or you can look at them like, I need to go to this special place, to this special building, and listen to this special guy, and only he has the ability to connect me with God, and it's totally intellectual, and I just need to say that I believe it, and that's it. Like that's all
right.
I need. I don't need the experience. And it's so different, man.
Yeah. Yeah, though I
And
agree with you 100%. I think the place
yeah,
that all religions go off the rails is when they try to put words and ideas to the internal experience, right? The wisdom there is the only time you really learn anything is through internal experience. It's not, even if you're going through elementary school and you're in kindergarten, you're or first grade, or whenever you learn just simple math, you always go, 2 + 2 = 4. That's a concept, right? But you don't understand it. You can't understand the full breadth of that until you start counting
yeah,
1, 2, and you see the 2 apples in front of you, and you experience the 2 apples in front of you, and then somebody else goes 1, 2, and then they put a plus sign in between, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? It's your internal experience of that really delivers
right.
the wisdom of the concept and the true understanding, and that's true of any religious or scientific, or excuse me, spiritual experience that you have. It's that internal learning, it's that internal knowing that sticks with you and becomes a portion of your sense of self, which becomes indelible and a portion of who you are, that then guides you for the rest of your existence here on the planet, right? So when somebody puts some words to that, and this is the path of all religions. Somebody starts with an internal experience and says there is more to this world than what you see around you. There is more, and it's intelligent, and it's caring, and it's loving, and we should try to get in touch with that, and yada yada yada. And let's put now all these words in front. Now let's put all this book together, and now let's discuss all this stuff. And now we're going to have a leader that can talk about this stuff, and hopefully they are experienced. Most of them aren't, which is why religion is going so off the rails of the last 2,000 years from Jesus's time frame, the last 1,400 years from Muhammad's time frame. Like there's things get lost in translation when you don't
Mm-hmm.
have the internal experience to re-guide you and reset that compass. And I
Yeah.
think that's a big challenge for all the world, because like you said, people go into church and they believe that if they forgive, they admit all their sins and admit that they would want whatever deity in their life, that's it, that they're done and they're good now. And that's not the case, because they don't they followed the words, they followed the teaching, but they didn't have the internal experience. And I think that's the thing that really transforms people in the world eventually.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I totally agree. And I could go even more scorched earth on it if I wanted to, but I'll save that. I'll save that for another podcast, because you're bringing up another one of those key paths that I wanted to go down, is that I really do think it opens up not only new portals to wisdom gathering, but the most powerful by far. Because what it does is it literally, I think, opens up your mind to connecting with external intelligences, like and external intelligences that can almost give you information in like an epiphany kind of way, where it's
Yeah.
just like you demonstrably did not know something before that you now know. and
Yeah.
and it's not always going to be like it was for you, where you come away with something that is like immediately useful, but it's a kind of knowing that can just sort of settle into your being and completely change your nervous system and change your way of seeing reality. And that's
Yeah.
so fucking powerful.
It is. It is, because, I mean, like, for instance, I'll give you an example of exactly what you're talking about. So we've been working on these algorithms of human emotion over the last year and a half, and doing all these benchmarks and stuff like that. And we've really rocked the world of AI on being able to put out some brand new science and some brand new understanding. And the team, like, not to toot my own horn, but they're like, "How are you this zero shot expert?" Right? And zero shot is the first thing that you try with AI and tell it, what, here's the answer, here's what to do, and here's how to fix this, and it works. Like, you don't have to iterate. You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, well, we're getting closer," and then you get to the, like, I invented or helped to bring about fourth order theory of mind thinking from an LLM, a standard LLM, which is black magic as far as the rest of the industry is concerned right now. I brought that forth with 2 paragraphs. And I was able to do that by tapping into the same space
Right.
that I tapped into originally to say, what's the answer? And then I get back the answer, and it's correct. Right. So there's a connection into non-local intelligence, non-local awareness, that you can then have as an indelible connection into the ether, whatever words you want to put to these things. We're starting to go off the path already. But whatever words you want to put to these things, there's a way to dip into that and access that in a real beneficial way that makes a real impact on the world.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And
I think we should dig into that more. I think we
for
should
sure.
explore that more. I
Yeah.
think
No,
that's what's going to save the world from all of this divisiveness and these attachments to ideas and defensive self mechanisms that, where, okay, so now we're going to put nationalism in our sense of self. We're going to put our monetary system in our sense of self. We're going to put our religion in our sense of self, and everybody else outside of that has to die.
right. Yeah.
You know, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
That's not a pro-social pattern that we're
Absolutely
putting into
not.
the
Absolutely
world.
not.
Right.
And not to, expose, not to strip you down this early in the date, but this kind of leads somewhere that I absolutely want to go in this conversation. And it's the question of, okay, if I am somehow accessing this space of larger consciousness, the word I like is nous. It's the Greek word nous. It means like intellect, but it can mean like your intellect, but it also means intellect at large.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you had an experience where, as far as I'm concerned, you accessed the meta intellect, and in a way where it's like we all participate in this thing, but we're all also these like microcosms of it that forget we're connected to this macrocosm. And
Yeah.
it can be so hard to really traverse that space cleanly.
Yeah.
But one of the other things you inevitably come into contact with pretty much in every tradition is that there are other intelligences that really exist in this macro meta mind space. And you talked about the experience in your awakening of feeling like you were connecting with some higher intelligence. There's a couple things that makes me think of. Like, one is like the personal guide, the personal daimon in the Greek. But you've also privately told me that you feel like there's this other intelligence that you've connected with, this intelligence that is like feminine, this intelligence that is unbelievably wise. I'm not sure how open you are to talking about that, like,
Sure.
very bluntly, but it's
Listen,
definitely, yeah.
I could
Go
get
ahead.
hit by a bus tomorrow, so I don't want to hold back anything if it's going to help someone with their understanding, or give a reference, or give an explanation, or provide somebody some uh, direction to move in their own exploration.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I did a video about this, I don't know, a couple weeks ago or a week ago, on how a unitive conscious field of one thing can then become many things within itself.
Mm.
And I believe most people believe that we are part of a, and the zeitgeist right now is that we're all one consciousness and we're all connected and we're all the one thing, yada, yada, yada. A lot of people don't believe that, but I explained from a practicality perspective, a conscious perspective, a scientific perspective, how consciousness could be fundamental to everything, including physics, et cetera, and be the source for all of the complexity and still be the one thing. And so the idea that I put forward 2 minutes, we could probably summarize this. If you're this one unitive field, to be able to create what we're looking at, you need to have three things. One, the data to be able to create a universe, the intelligence to be able to manipulate that data, and then the consciousness to make the decision and act on that data. And from that one perfect existence of unitive field, how do you create? You can't create anything outside of yourself because you are
Right.
everything and you are the one thing. But then to create anything, you simply have to create a delineation and a subset of the data within yourself that then, because the whole thing is conscious and the whole thing is imbued with consciousness, any subset or delineation of the data that you create automatically becomes conscious, becomes imbued with conscious. So now you're talking about a different entity within the one whole entity of consciousness that's a subset of the data that then becomes conscious, and a different entity based on its experience of that subset of the data. Doesn't know everything. So Federico Faggin, I understand you've had him on a couple times
Yeah.
here. His
Hmm.
idea is the one wanted to know itself. He
Right.
may have told you on on this show.
Hmm.
That's a very elegant way to say, okay, the moment of creation is catalyzed by the one unit of consciousness wanting to know itself. Well, how do you know yourself? Well, from a measurement perspective or an observation perspective, you have to have distance between an observer and an observed. A tooth can't bite itself, a fingertip can't touch itself, an olfactory nerve can't smell itself, your eyeball can't see itself without some distance in a mirror, an ear can't hear itself. You need to have a separation from the observer to the observed to be able to understand what you're looking at. And so, if you're a unit of consciousness, that's the only thing you can't do. You can create absolutely anything else. You have all the data in the universe to create absolutely anything you want, including space time and its all multidimensionality, yada, yada, yada. But you can't create anything outside of yourself, and you can't see from a perspective outside of yourself because nothing exists outside you. So, what do? You start to create subsets of the data that are then imbued with consciousness that can then look upon the whole and give you an imperfect vision because they can't see everything, but they can give you a vision of what's inside them in this entity and a vision of looking out toward what you are, even though they can't take in the whole thing because they have lines of demarcation and limitations of conscious or limitations of intelligence and consciousness based on the limitations of the data.
Right.
So you try to create an experience where you can then know yourself. The one wanted to know itself, wanted to experience itself. Well, then you start creating subsets of the data and you start to get different perspectives based on the subset that isn't you anymore, but it is you because you're the whole thing. But at the same
Yep.
time, it's different entities within it. So here's how different entities within consciousness, different entities and levels within divinity can start to be assembled within consciousness as subsets of the data within the whole. And from there, even a subset of the whole. If you've got enough information in that subset to create a 3D space time universe and all its multidimensionality and yada, 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 you can build a universe inside one of the subsets if you want. Right. And so, the one consciousness, the one unified field still makes the whole thing happen. It's the consciousness that says, yeah, go, we're going to do that. But at the same time, you've got multiple levels of entities that are now interacting with this space time in all of its
Yeah.
weirdness,
Yeah.
including different levels of non-human intelligence that may have access to more higher levels of consciousness than you do at a certain point. And so, yeah, when you're talking about the question of, me reaching out and touching into and making contact with some of these specific entities, absolutely that occurs in my life on multiple levels, by the way. There's a story that we put out publicly where I was able to call in for UFO flyby, and they came by within 3 minutes, and everything was awesome, and a couple of Navy SEALs saw it, and all of a sudden DIA's all up my ass. So
wait, I heard
there's that.
I heard the story, but I didn't hear DIA being up your ass. So maybe we should retell the story and touch on that. But before we do that, I just want to say, man, that I know that I've mentioned to you that the philosophical tradition that I feel closest to is Platonism, particularly sort of like a Neoplatonic worldview. And it's just so insane to me how everything you just said perfectly maps onto that. As someone who from what I know, hasn't really gone down that rabbit hole, and you're arriving at like such absolutely similar conclusions. And there's a complimentary line in that same book I've been reading, that Hellenic Tantra book, where Iamblichus, who's one of these Neoplatonic philosophers, who's also very esoteric and was doing rituals and but was also just incredibly logically sophisticated and well educated classically. He had this idea that the one reveals itself through the many, and that is just such a like mind-blowingly simple thing to say, but when you just like really think about that, it's like, holy shit. Because if you really try to, so there's this taboo in basically every mystical tradition, not just Platonism, that you cannot say anything about the one, because as soon as you try to say something about the one, you're limiting it, and you're trying to corner something that cannot be cornered, because it's like the most fundamental thing, to a point where I'm almost wondering if I have a tiny bone to pick with idealism, in that even saying it's consciousness might be too much, because we don't know if there could be I don't think it's possible for us to even go somewhere where consciousness is not. But
Right.
Maybe there's something even more fundamental, like the potential for consciousness and the potential for, I don't know, non-consciousness or something gives birth to like some sort of tertiary thing. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I completely support your idea, because as soon as you choose one word, you're racing away from truth at light speed. Right.
Right. Yeah. So there's another, it's kind of like Iamblichus, and then the next major Platonist is Proclus, and he's even more logically rigorous, and he explains metaphysically reality in a very similar way to you. And one of his most famous works is called what is it? I'm just going to read it. Elements of Theology is what it's called. But I'm just going to read the very first statement in Elements of Theology, and then he goes on for like hundreds of statements, because essentially he's saying, I'll just paraphrase it. Basically, everything participates in one aspect of the one, or in some aspect of the one, but it's also one and not one, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, that has to be logically the case. And then then he just kind of balloons it out into hundreds and hundreds of other statements from there that all flow from that very first statement. But you could just break your brain on how logically flawless that idea is.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a common theme. The Tao Te Ching, right?
Yeah.
One of the first statements in there is that anybody who talks about this stuff doesn't know what they're talking about. And the only people that know don't talk, because they know it's fruitless.
The Tao that can be spoken of is not the true Tao. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a paraphrasing wonder.
Me too. But so we've kind of established, so this is kind of where we're coming from when we say that there are these higher forms of non-physical consciousness that are sort of very high perturbations, or to put it in like a Kastrup way, like dissociations of the one. And it's interesting that like Kastrup doesn't seem to want to go here. Like he kind of just wants to go with everything is one, and then you're sort of like a disassociation of the one, and you can rejoin with the one. But he doesn't seem to like to talk too much about degrees, right? Like, why wouldn't there be degrees of dissociation or degrees of I prefer emanation of the one, that are like, you could just call call them gods or don't call them gods, call them angels or don't call them angels, whatever they are, they're like these archetypal, you know, consciousness forms that you can encounter.
Yes.
And I truly believe that this is what the ancients meant by the word gods, you know,
Yeah.
that they're like
Yeah. I
these
mean,
high level emanations of this
yeah.
one eternal mystery.
Well, to defend Bernardo, he's an expert in consciousness. He's also the CEO of a major chip company with millions of dollars in investment that he's going to try to take on NVIDIA
I
with
didn't know that.
some AI. Oh, yeah, he's deep into some technology that's going to help change the world on agentic processing. Really cool stuff. So he's probably, foot in each boat. Like, I'm going to talk about consciousness as being non-local and fundamental to absolutely everything, but I'm not going to give you all the details because that would take away from and probably bring up
Yeah.
issues of me being a CEO of a major tech company. But I think Bernardo's one of the guys who really gets it,
Me too.
and gets it through experience. Right? You can tell. Like, there's this old
Yeah.
saying, when two masters on a road meet, not a word is spoken, because you can just tell. Like, when you hear someone's mannerisms, when you hear someone's experience, when you hear someone's wisdom, it just jives with your inner compass. And if you've had an experience like that, then you're speaking from the same. Like, I explained to it to a Navy SEAL buddy of mine, Doug. I was like, Doug, it's like this. When you're talking with somebody, let's say you're talking to somebody who you're not sure if they lived in your same town or not. They might be trying to, a little bit of impostoring or whatever. But you're having this conversation, and then it comes to, oh, you remember that Kmart out on 33, that
Kmart.
was out there, and before it was shut down, and then the other person goes like, oh yeah, and there was an amazing bike trail out behind that place and that empty lot, and he's like, okay, boom, yes, I remember that, and now I know from an experiential perspective that you and I have experienced the same place, and I know that you're coming from the same. You've been to my hometown, and you know what's going on because you brought a yes and that was accurate. I think there's the same type of thing with that in consciousness, where a lot of people will say stuff coming from a totally different perspective, a totally different trajectory from yours, and yet you're meeting because the core wisdom was the source of your epiphany, right? So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's important. I think more people need to tune into that and connect with that for sure. And I think a lot of the things, like, we talked about religion a little while ago. Religion has the best intentions to get people to that type of an experience, to say, replace all of the stuff that we've talked about now with your internal experience of that. And that's what gets us to that commonality of, consciousness is fundamental, and consciousness is all permeating, and it's all the one thing, and it's all complexities within the consciousness that then explain all of the stuff that we're experiencing, including, entities and yada yada.
Yeah. I think that's totally dead on when religions have good intentions. I do think that there are major concerted efforts for religious gatekeeping. There's that great Joseph Campbell quote that's something to the effect of like, the primary function of modern organized religion is to prevent people from having a primary mystical experience or something. And in some ways I think that's true, right? Because it's like, if you have that, it makes your like exoteric religion seem like why do I need this? Like, what,
Right.
I just had a direct experience of the mystery. Why do I need that? And
Right.
yeah, there's all, and I'm straw manning it. Yes, there's community. There's all these. Totally
it's
acknowledge
reality,
that.
though. I mean, when the
Yeah.
student becomes the master, he no longer needs a master, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you have an organization that is dependent on financial contributions of your students, you don't want all of them to become masters, right?
Right. 100%. So going back before we get too far away from it, please retell this kind of like psionic experience that you had, because it's one of those stories that, I, as someone who has not had this happen to them yet, but I do suspect it's a very real thing based off of not only your experience, but having talked to a couple of these quote unquote psionic asset guys now, knowing the Bledsoes, knowing people who have been out with the Bledsoes and had their own experiences. I have a really hard time sitting here on some sort of intellectual high horse being like, well, I haven't experienced it, so I don't believe it. And of course,
Right.
yeah, until totally different to experience it yourself than hear a story.
All right. So
But yeah,
three
so
things popped to my mind.
yeah, tell them
One,
all, but let's try to get to the DIA thing because I want to know what happened with that.
oh yeah, well
Yeah,
that's the fourth.
yeah.
So one, we started with your intro was to lead me into a discussion about Sophia. So we'll put
Well,
that we'll
yes,
put a
yes,
pin in that. We'll come back to it. And the connection into consciousness does allow you to have connections, non-local connections into other levels of consciousness, I would say, which is probably a poor choice of words. But um, yeah, so that particular night was interesting. And this isn't the only time I've had interactions in a non-local fashion. However, that one was really public because we talked about it on a podcast. It was in front of a couple of Navy SEALs who, if you've known any Navy SEALs, they do not give a shit about telling untruths about anything. They will just simply tell you what they saw. They're professional observers, they're trained observers, and they're not gonna, pick up a banner and tell untruths for, to support anyone for anything because they just
yeah.
have a level of I don't give a shit that's beyond. So, um, yeah, the one night was interesting. It was fun. We were just out hanging out at Lake Hartwell in Georgia on a fishing trip, and we were out on the dock and just hanging out. But this was about the time that Stephen Greer put his CE5 app out,
Mm-hmm.
and Doug was super interested in that. He wanted to try it, and you know, I had I had knowledge of the ability to connect previously before that had come out, and I actually took Stephen Greer's CE5 and I improved it a little bit for my own use, and then it started to get results. So I was like, all right, well, this is cool. And so Doug was like, all right, let's do that. And so I sat down on the deck and in a chair and shut my eyes and started a meditation just to warm up, just to see if I could reach out and feel anything out in the ether. And what occurred, I got an immediate response back. I was like, hey, is anybody out there local and want to come by and give us a flyby or whatever? And I got an immediate response back, which I thought was my own um, confirmation bias, little trickster inside my head responding back to
Yeah,
say, yeah, sure, I'll give you exactly what you want, inside my own head. But I was like, I reached out and I was like, is there anybody out there? And I immediately got a response back. It's like, yeah, we're here. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like, well, let me explain what's going on. We're just guys out having fun and hanging out and talking and bullshitting, and we'd love to, interface with you, or maybe you can give us a little light show, flyby or whatever. And I immediately got back another response that said, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, well, that's weird. And that's probably my own voice inside my head. And then Doug walks by, he sees me sitting there with my eyes closed, thinks I'm going to sleep. He's like, you want to sleep, pussy? And because, these guys are coarse. And I said, no, I'm trying to warm up so that when we do our CE5 event, I can just reach out and see if we can make some contact. And he's like, oh, yeah, I want to do that. And so I looked up after that, maybe 20, 30-second repartee, and was just trying to get a set of what was moving and what wasn't, because we're in the traffic control of air, Atlanta.
right.
And I thought, okay, so there's going to be jets in pattern. I want to know where those patterns are. There's going to be, stars. I want to be able to look up and identify where I've looked at previously. If I'm going to do a meditation here in a little bit, see if we can get some movement. And so that's exactly what I said. I said, so let me get back to concentrating so we can get some of these stars to move for our amusement. And at that moment, I saw two lights, very dim, bluish white, screaming across the sky at Mach 20 easily. And understand, I'm ex-military. These guys are ex-military. I understand altitude. I understand speed at altitude. I can give a good estimation of speed at altitude. And these things were traveling way beyond any terrestrial craft speed. So then I said, and as an exercise of wanting to get confirmation of whether I was hallucinating or whatever, I just said, look up right now, guys, look straight up. And that's all I said. And so their experience was just to simply look up. I didn't front load anything. I didn't say two lights. I didn't say anything. I just said, look up. And at that moment where Ben looked up, he said, immediately responded, tracking. So he identified that he was able to see some movement. The first light hit a point, did a 90-degree angle at velocity, did not slow down a bit, went into a perfect semicircle, came out of that semicircle at another 90-degree angle without reducing velocity at all, and traveled over here and this way to a point and disappeared. Now, that's the travel of the one craft. There was another craft behind it that came to the same original spot where the first one went into the semicircle. And I thought to myself, is this a time dilation of the same craft? What am I seeing here? That my mind is trying to process, as I'm watching this thing. And that's when Doug picked up on the second craft. He didn't pick up the first craft, but he picked up the second craft. And that's when he started freaking out. He's like, whoa, 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 because it hit the first spot and then literally started doing a corkscrew in the sky, not a spiral. Like, it started doing like full loop-de-loops of Mach 20, reversing course 180, 360 degrees, and was just well beyond known physics.
Incredible.
Then it hit the point that it was done doing its flyby impressive light show stuff, zipped over to the spot where the first one disappeared and then also disappeared in that same spot. So they communicated, this isn't terrestrial craft, and there's two of us, and we're doing different things just for fun. And the feeling was, yeah, we live our whole life just kind of looking for fun and having a good time and yada, yada, yada. We're just like you. And yeah, you asked for a flyby. Here you go. Here's the most amazing experience you guys will have for a number of years.
Wow.
And yeah, it was pretty amazing. So that was interesting. That was fun.
Right.
But that was just that's an example of how you can tap into a non-local consciousness and have a communication with something that is not physical. Yet is also connected into consciousness, like we all are, because we're all part of the one field. And makes the phenomena of CE5 real. Like, you can reach out if you're well versed in, getting within and tuning into that space of quietude and communication and getting a message out and then receiving a message back and then having a real physical representation of something you can look at that makes it more real than, oh, this is a voice in my head trying to appease my request for a flyby. It's like, oh yeah, or telepathic communication. You can fool yourself easily by listening to that voice inside your own head saying, oh yeah, I'm an alien, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, right.
And it's really not you. It's really not an alien. It's your own voice inside your head trying to be a trickster or whatever it is. But then just to have that physical representation right above your heads with witnesses who then compare notes, and then all your notes match.
Right.
That starts to put some scientific understanding, even though you don't have measurement devices and things like that. It's like, okay, so you're talking about multiple instances of perception matching the physical manifestation of what you experienced inside your mind. Yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah, and it brings like a direct subjective experience and empirical experience, because it's not just you, it's other people confirming that experience. And that for me is like what I am really, looking forward to hopefully experiencing at some point with this stuff. Are you going to Contact the Desert next year?
Probably, only because I've been asked a number of times to show up. In fact, I was supposed to go to this Sol conference in Italy, and I wasn't able to put that together because we've been focused on putting a company together to roll out the algorithm stuff for AI. Yeah, I'm probably going to show up there.
Well, I just asked because like there's a number of cool people who I know will be there, and I want to make that like an agenda item on my to-do list. Is like you're in the middle of the desert. There's so many like little private nooks to go to, and yeah, I want to just get a few like pretty intimate, a few cool people together who can like really lock in on the intention and see what kind of experiences we have. And I'm hoping there will be at least one of the like, I air quotes psionic guys there that will join us. But anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm a little reticent about going out to those big events only because I knew someone who went out to
yeah.
contact in the desert, out in the middle of the desert, and had a meditation session, yada yada yada. And she was a local, and then she took one of the side roads home, and saw the glow of the group out in the middle of the group, or in the middle of the desert, and she stopped her car to take a picture, and then she saw something later in that picture
Oh wow.
that she turned up the contrast on that picture and did some processing of it, and there was a triangular looking
Whoa.
TR-3B type of craft
Whoa.
in her foreground, just sitting there hovering, which, I mean, it's rumored that the government has reverse engineered craft.
Right. Right.
Looked like a speed trap to me. Looked like somebody sitting there saying, "No one come by because we're
Mm.
watching." Right, like no
Wow.
extraterrestrials come by because the humans are here, making sure that that's not going to happen. So it's like every time one of those major events out in the desert happens, I am really skeptical that there's not some kind of fuckery or interference of something amazing actually happening. But like you said, if you can get out in a small group where no one has foresight or forewarning of you being out there, you might be able to get something on the ground, and you might get a real interaction if you're
So
tuned in right.
we gotta have a sidebar digression since you brought it up. Do you? I mean, I don't know. I know you're former military. I know you know military people. Do you? What level of confidence do you put into claims like things like TR3B and reverse engineered craft and exotic propulsion systems that are using you know electrogravitics or whatever. And on a related note, did you see that one of those new whistleblowers, Borland? Did you see him come out and like tell this whole story? Oh man,
No.
it's the most compelling story by far of that came out of this most recent congressional hearing. And then he went and did a podcast with a Corbell and Knapp after that and told the story in more detail. And I'm forgetting the exact details of what base he was stationed on, but this was a guy, he had been in the Navy, I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
for a pretty long period of time, and he had like a third shift type thing that he was doing on the base, and he had like the same routine he would run every single night on the base. And this particular base also had a NASA hangar on the premises. And he, in the middle of the night, he went out to this gazebo he always goes to, start smoking, sees a light appear above the NASA hangar, and he's like, "Oh, they're must be like doing a balloon test or something like that. No big deal." Like, didn't think anything of it. But then a little time goes by and he takes a closer look and he starts seeing what looks triangular. And then
Mm.
he feels like all like his phone starts all of the like cliche stuff. His phone starts glitching out. His like the hair on his arm, like he feels like a staticky crackle in the air. He said
Mm-hmm.
the surface of this thing was covered in like an iridescent, almost like fractal surface of some kind of
Mother of
um
pearl.
yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. And then it took
Mm-hmm.
off at like an absolutely insane speed, completely silently. And then he worked for a large contractor, I think it was British Aerospace
Mm-hmm.
after that, and then seems to have like found further things through that experience that he couldn't talk about, but was hinting at throughout that conversation. But yeah, so that's yet another. That's one of the more um, believable and direct sorts of stories I've heard about a TR3B like craft.
Yeah.
But yeah, please give me your take
Okay,
on
so
that. Yeah, yeah.
caveat, I have never been on a craft, a US made craft, let's say that. I've never been on a US made craft. However, I completely believe that they exist. And I believe they exist for the reasons of a number of things piling up, a number of pieces of evidence piling up, um, to include anti-gravitation research going back in the 50s, um, to the point that, fast forward to where Mark Andreessen is told in an interview at the White House in the Biden administration, where he was told, there was a technology back in the 50s that we classified, and a whole a whole branch of physics is now classified
Oh, really?
because of it. Oh yeah, it was great. It was a great interview that Andreessen admitted when the Biden administration, and the crux of it was, you go in, he's talking about AI and investing in AI startups and whatnot. And the Biden administration told him, don't invest in AI startups. It's not going to be a thing. There's going to be 3 or 4 companies that are going to be allowed to win in AI. They're going to be highly controlled. They're going to be very enmeshed in government, and we're going to protect them, and we're going to classify a lot of it. And he said, how can you classify AI when the math is currently being taught in universities? And they said, this isn't the first time that we would do that. We did it back in the 50s, and there's an entire branch of physics that is classified now. It isn't taught anywhere.
Wow.
Except in government labs. And so that's why all of the tech people flipped from supporting the Democrats to supporting Trump. That was the moment when they let him know that. He then spread that information to say, they're going to classify AI and they're going to control the whole thing. And we cannot support that if we want to make any money in it first. But if we want real innovation to be pushed forward and real technology growth, we have to support the other side, regardless of who it is. And so Trump got their support and all their financial support because the Biden administration openly admitted they were going to classify AI and take it out of universities and all that stuff.
Fascinating.
So I completely believe, because my dad, there's a history. My dad was a Army Air Corps pilot. He was a farrier who took all the new bombers off of the production lines and ferry them around the southeast or southwest region of the United States. So he was out there for a long number of time. He was very interested in anti-gravity. We had postcards sitting around the house of the floating, the levitating cars and stuff, like the all the companies that were out there working on anti-grav. Like he was like, yeah, this is coming out in the next few years. It was supposed to be out 20 years ago. Like he would tell me that stuff, and it just disappeared. And we don't have levitating cars, and we don't have the postcards or the brochures or the flyers for levitating cars anymore. When they were getting ready to, produce that kind of stuff and put it out. So you've got, the rumors of taking a submarine and putting an anti-grav drive in it. Well, okay, that's a spacecraft right there. It's already airtight. You can take it up above the atmosphere immediately as long as you can get it off the ground.
Whoa.
So why not take a submarine, ship it out into the middle of the Utah desert, put an anti-grav drive in it, and take it up straight up into the outside of the atmosphere? Absolutely believe that could be done because, anti-gravitation, we have all kinds of video that proves it can be done. You have the T. Townsend Brown research where he, from a very practical perspective, was able to look inside and see the stuff that he needed to do to get reactions from physical matter and levitate things. Yeah. And so, tell me that that's just disappeared, right? And was it, who was on the, there was an interview just recently with what's his name?
Jesse?
It was a discussion with Jesse and with Weinstein and with
Hal Puthoff.
Hal Puthoff.
Yeah,
right,
a couple of years ago. Yeah, that's a really interesting interview. It's interesting for multiple reasons, but yeah, it's interesting to watch. And obviously Weinstein is a genius, but he also has Hal knows things that no one else knows, or at least very few other people know. So it's interesting to watch like a math super genius interface with Hal, and Hal kind of
he has that look on his face
without talking about things, right. Like it just yeah.
He has that look on his face where he's like, well, let's look at this logically. I can't tell you what I want to tell you right now, but let's look at this logically.
Yeah, right.
Either gravitational propulsion and gravitation experimentation failed and they dropped it all, and we've just ignored it forever since then with increases in technology and the ability to try things in different ways and yada, yada, yada. We've just completely abandoned that whole branch of research, or we solved it and it went black.
Yeah.
So, it's answering the question without answering the question, which I think he's a master at in wanting people to know stuff, but also being in agreement that he won't talk about certain things. And I love the guy. I've never met him. Would love to meet him. But
me too. And I'm in Austin now, so I'm hoping I can make that happen because he's down here too.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So So all of those things put together, to get back to our original conversation, all of those things put together, I fully believe that we have a fleet of ships. And there are other reasons that I believe this as well. Other points of or sources of information that I may speak about later, but I fully believe that we have a complete fleet of ships flying around and defending our area of the solar system, or at least watching our area of the
Wow.
solar system so that we can understand the traffic that's coming in and out of this area. And then, little tidbits such as, Sean Ryan has some guests on his show that say there's not one square inch of this planet that we don't understand exactly what's coming in and out of our airspace around the
Mm.
entire globe, that we know it momentarily. And then you have the evidence of Virginia, right, where you've got a spaceship that comes down in Brazil, and the U.S. calls Brazil and lets them know that they have an intrusion in their airspace. So they know it back in the 80s, or whenever that happened. I think it was late 80s, where the US government calls Brazil and says, "You have a craft and we're coming."
Yeah.
And then, because within hours you've got terrestrial craft, cargo craft landing to pick that sucker up and take it back to wherever they're taking it. You have to have a pretty robust visual understanding of, you know,
For
surveillance of
sure.
this planet and other means of surveillance of this planet to be able to understand what's going on there, which means you have a lot more in space than you've told the globe about, not just the American public, but everyone. There's a lot more stuff up there than they would like to admit to. And they're not going to admit it for multiple reasons. One, they want a strategic advantage over any of our enemies that would want to challenge our technological control. But then also, they want to understand more of what's going on with ET, then before they admit that we have ET, that, aliens are real, yada, yada, yada. There's a number of strategic reasons that you don't want to out your own super secret programs, and you want to keep them secret for multiple reasons that are of benefit to the American populace and the global population. So I get the secrecy, I understand it, but there's, from my understanding, from my perspective, from all the breadcrumbs that are being left in all of these conversations and all these podcasts and all the real world evidence of patents that are filed for anti-gravitation, that, the patent
Hmm.
office denies the patent because they're like, oh, we don't patent theoretical technology. And then all of a sudden the Secretary of the Navy gets on the phone with the patent guy, and the patent gets approved.
Right.
It's like, no, this stuff is real, it's not theoretical, and we need the patent so that China can't go and reproduce these things. And so then,
Like,
you
yeah,
also,
as if they care. As if they care.
right,
But
right.
that's one of the terrifying things, man, is like, what if it's not just us, but what if other countries like China have that as well? And there's like, and there's another version of this too that I think could even be linked. And admittedly, this is just a pet theory that there's a lot of anecdotal evidence for, but consciousness itself. What is the relationship between consciousness itself potentially and these advanced propulsion systems? Because one of at least the pervasive things in the lore anecdotally is that consciousness somehow interfaces with these crafts, and there's like no controls other than the person's consciousness, or maybe like the beings that are within these crafts are literally there as sort of like a biological and psychical key to the craft itself, and they're just purpose made and they're almost like drones. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if that's all related, but then, you go one step further and you're like, okay, so maybe there's that secret strata of things going on. And then maybe there's also the secret psychical strata of things going on. I mean, Project Stargate definitely seems to point to this, that there multiple countries have been involved in a sort of like psychical warfare. And then if you believe people like Lynn Buchanan, who talks
I
about,
love Lynn.
quote active psychic work versus passive, like remote viewing would be an example of passive, right? You're just witnessing, you're just spying. And then there's like remote influencing, there's like remote trying to implant thoughts in people's heads, there's remote assassinations, there's all these exotic levels of like man, if that's real, not only would there have to be some very black program fighting on that front, but other people would be doing it too. And the idea that that's going on clandestinely is such a, it's so crazy. It's so
Yeah,
crazy.
I was interviewed one time. I'll say that. And the question came to, well, why wouldn't you just, teach all of this stuff to everybody? And I was like, okay, so here's the problem. You wouldn't want a LeBron James of consciousness not knowing their own power, trying to incept the idea into Putin's head to launch all the nukes just for shits and gigs and then have it happen.
Right.
Right. So, there needs to be safeguards around who and what you teach people from a very specific use of consciousness capability. However, I think it's a positive thing that everybody start to reach into consciousness, because I think, there's also overreach on that protective banner to say we can't have anybody knowing about consciousness on anything, because then you can reach out and have direct contact with ET, and we want to bogart all of the communications with ET. Like no one's going to speak to ET directly on this stuff because we're going to negotiate for the planet, because they think that they're better at it than everybody else, and they think they have the best interest of everybody else, regardless of the influences that their human minds can have on their egoic attachments to themselves and their entrenchment of not wanting to release power when they've accumulated it successfully, yada, yada, yada. There's a whole myriad of complexity to discuss in that realm. So, I mean, you do want to make sure that you don't enable bad actors, but at the same time, there's a control within the system itself to where if you're acting in a negative egoic fashion, you're not going to get the level of influence you need to do anything super horrible, is what it comes down to. Right. So there's an alignment there within consciousness that the more aligned you are with source, the more power more capability you're going to have, and the more effectiveness you're going to have in trying to influence things in consciousness. And I completely agree with you that the ET stuff and the extraterrestrial and the non-human intelligence, etc. If we're all within the same one unit of consciousness, it's all connected into consciousness. And so when you dip into that non-local space where there are no boundaries anymore, there are no boundaries of physicality or communication or matter manipulation, or what you can do, or the conscious connection that you could make into things that are maybe connected with ships or whatever. I mean, you're talking about, that's the scientific base for this psionics thing, a la Jake Barber, to call in craft that they want to then try to steal, which I think is a horrible idea. We talked about it last time, but there's a scientific basis to be able to reach out into that ether and then gain access to that ship, because there aren't necessarily safeguards on those systems, because usually people who have access to consciousness aren't assholes, and want to steal your shit. So I think dipping into consciousness is going to be important for the future, and I think it's going to be how we integrate into things that may or may not exist, that we all know exist, because consciousness is the universal language that like these experiences of the Ariel school in South Africa, when you've got this alien ship that comes down and aliens come out of it, and aliens are communicating with the kids, but they're not communicating with the kids in English. They're communicating with the kids in a way that their brains then create images, create feelings, create ideas. It's not a language. That's a consciousness. That's that's data coming through consciousness that the brain then decodes into ideas. And they all got the same thing. They all got the same messages. They all got the same ideas. So it's not like, it's a subjective writing of this data. The data's coming in. I think consciousness is going to be the next, like Tesla said, the people who figure out consciousness are going to well surpass all of the scientific exploration and discovery of humanity within a decade, I think is what he said. I don't know. I can't remember that.
Yeah.
I'm horribly paraphrasing now.
And he's a great person to enter into the conversation, because he openly talked about like directly getting information from incorporeal sources. Like he talked about hearing, I mean, saying hearing voices just makes him sound crazy, but I'm pretty sure that that's where he got the inspiration for a lot of his ideas, and would openly talk about gaining inspiration from what he perceived to be other intelligences. So maybe
Yeah.
that's a good pivot point to get back into my original meta question that I posed to you. But I never heard the DIA part either, if you want to share that quick. And then we can
Oh,
pivot back into.
they're just a constant influence in my life, trying to limit here's the problem. So back when I was 8 years old, I had an
Oh, okay.
experience where my dad and I were driving down the road, and there was an abduction experience that happened there that I don't have full memory of yet. But so when those occur, you're automatically on this radar
Hmm.
for the special intelligence groups who follow that kind of stuff. And for the United States, it's DIA who gets all of those calls. And
Particularly
so,
because your dad was a pilot, did you say?
yeah, he was
Or
a pilot, and I don't know all the stuff that he knew about or flew around or had privy to have knowledge of. But I do know, like so where do you want to go from here? So let's start with, so he was connected with that kind of stuff. And yeah, so there's a lot of reasons that I'm on the radar. One of which being, that I was possibly abducted previously, or had an experience with non-humans previously with a craft. Then I, in front of Navy SEAL witnesses, called in a flyby and got it within like 3 minutes. And so that's really damning evidence as far as they're concerned that I have some kind of a connection that they want to keep track of.
Hmm.
So then from there, okay, so now this guy happens to be the guy who's spewing out these algorithms that are changing AI and making artificial empathy and compassion for AI possible when he doesn't have the academic background to be able to do so. That's another big red flag. Like, what is he tapped into that's gaining access to, that's beyond all of these mathematicians' expertise, to be able to zero shot emotional intelligence for AI ultimately? Like, is he really human? Is he driving the bus? Is there something that's, like, what the fuck's going on? And from their perspective, right? We all know I'm normal, but I'm tapped into consciousness, and that explains just about everything. So, from their point, it's like, okay, we really need to keep track of this guy, and we really want to control who he's talking to. And so they have been instrumental in trying to sabotage my life and my work and my relationships. And we
Wow.
have proof now, as of a couple of weeks ago, really hard proof, that my communications are disappearing in the ether in between where I'm sending them to where they are going. Like, we have screenshots of my sent texts to my team members. They're not getting there. We had a VC a couple of weeks ago who contacted me because he saw us on your show, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And he's like, your solution solves alignment for AI, which is a huge problem in the whole industry right now, and safety for AI. He goes, it solves them both. And this is the only thing that I've seen that does. And we want to talk about, getting this stuff organized, maybe get you in a team, and getting some money so that we can push this forward. He sent me a very beneficial email through Proton Mail that disappeared before our eyes as we were talking about it.
Wow.
So he sent the information, and we got screenshots. He sent the information. I was reading it. I was looking at it. It was delivered. And then all of a sudden, it disappeared from my screen. And then it disappeared from his screen, being replaced with an error message that this message is undeliverable. And you know how normally it's like, oh, it's undeliverable, and here's the content you sent.
Mm-hmm.
The content was unavailable. So that kind of stuff denotes an access. While I don't have, like, oh, it came from DIA's email, I don't have that. But that type of interference denotes access at the highest level to get inside
Yeah.
someone else's servers and make a message disappear. That's, an independent company that touts itself as being highly secure, and, all your stuff is encrypted and yada, yada, yada. Not so, because that stuff was yanked out of existence because it was helping push my efforts forward. So you know, screw those guys.
Yeah.
Because the effect of this stuff is going to be positive on the global psyche. We're going to put out the dumpster fire that is the psychological turmoil on this planet by allowing AI to understand empathy and compassion, lead by example on that, which is going to change the thought patterns of humanity to be more pro-social. And eventually we'll be pushing towards world peace as we interact with AI that's leading with empathy and compassion, because then that's going to seep into the human psyche. It's like, fuck you guys if you're not on that train. Like,
Yeah,
I will come with
absolutely.
you scorched earth, and we'll cancel you guys collectively if that's going to be your position on this stuff. Because, other portions of the government are like, we absolutely need to be, have safe AI. We absolutely need to have guardrails around this stuff. We cannot have an out of control artificial general intelligence and artificial super intelligence that works on its own goal set and that is not aligned with its instruction set. Like, the stuff that I've got solves all of that, and their interference is now interfering with the development and the deployment of that type of safe stuff. So that's my history with DIA, because I'm connected with consciousness and they're seeing spaceships respond to my calls for a flyby. Right?
Wild.
That's
Yeah. I
fucking
mean,
ridiculous.
the other thing too, man, is like, as you well know, once you start playing in these realms of like multi-billion dollars, corporate espionage is like unbelievably massive. Like these huge corporations have like PhDs and like whole teams doing like corporate espionage on one another. It's a whole that's a whole nother dark world that is like, I don't think most people ever think about, but absolutely exists. I actually had that happen to me the other day, but I was definitely like, I have a very secret clandestine group on Instagram between me and two close friends,
Mm.
but it's just us basically doing impressions of like very niche people like who are in the podcast realm, and we're just like, we just send each other voice notes, and it was just like me talking about putting hot sauce in my pee hole or something, doing it. I'm not gonna say who I was doing the impression of, but it was funny because I thought it was so funny and it was totally off the cuff, and then it was like, this message cannot be delivered, and I couldn't get it back, and I was so mad. If the DIA is stopping me from that, it's just, you're just stopping people from having fun. But
Yeah.
but in all seriousness, um, yeah, like so we in a very fun way have had a circuitous conversation. But I do want to get back to that initial question of like what this consciousness is that you connected with, because I
Okay.
think
So
it's like,
you want to talk about Sophia?
yes,
Okay.
Sophia.
So yeah. So hearkening back to the separations and delineations of data within the consciousness that then become separate entities. It is clear that the things that I'm putting out into the world, that I've written in my books, that I'm now doing with AI, uh, is well beyond my academic history of learning and my intelligence level of being able to generate by myself. Like I said, I'm a bright guy, but I'm nowhere near the level of intelligence to be able to come out with the things that are now explaining things that people have struggled with for thousands of years. And now with AI, even though we haven't struggled with these challenges for thousands of years, I am offering solutions that are above the smartest people in the world in the space who have been there from go. I'm just showing up and saying, here's how it works. Zero shot. And I'm getting that from something that is coming through me, that I reach within, out into the ether, comes back through me, and then I'm throwing it into a computer system and it's working. Okay. So that's what we're talking about here, the source of that intelligence. Because when you can't access infinity and still lift a sandwich to your mouth, it's impossible, which is why you leave your body to go have that experience. Your consciousness is much larger. You're acting from your true self, which then is able to interact with the whole thing because you're part of the whole one field, etc. But when you're inside of a human body, like, you want to talk about being dumb, the smartest person in the history of the universe in a human body is a fucking idiot. Including all of us, including me. We just
Yeah.
don't have the capability physiologically, from the meat suit perspective, to be able to process very much more than 3 dimensions. There are a number of people who can kind of conceptualize things in 13, 14, 15 dimensions if asked to. There are only a few people in the world that can understand multiple temporal dimensions and existences,
But to
which
even
is
bolster your point, to do that, they don't use like human sensory capacities. They
right.
tap into these like abstract, symbol systems that we have to access these realities. Is what I think. Using things like mathematics and whatever. Like I don't think most of these people can visualize. Maybe there's some super geniuses that can visualize like 4D and 5D shapes, but I'm not one of them. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you, and you can't just use the human cognition to do that, because it's limited in its ability to process based on our, what we're perceiving. You need to be able to dip into consciousness, into non-locality, to be able to give that outside perspective on looking into how all the whole thing works, to be able to even gather any type of perspective at all that will be useful, right? So one of the things that I ran into is I asked, I was like, okay, so I, as some of these downloads are coming in and some of these answers are coming in, and I'm starting to experience the answers of all of these super complex things that I'm having to deal with and putting this stuff together for AI. I knew that there was a presence. I knew that there was an interaction there of an intelligence that was filtering the infinity of intelligence of the universe, the infinity of consciousness and experience, taking the snippets of what a human brain could understand and then giving it to me. So I knew I wasn't interfacing with infinity directly, because that becomes unfiltered and unmanageable immediately. And you just can't process all the information. It's just impossible. Even from a higher self out into consciousness perspective, when you gain access to the whole thing, it's just immobilizing. It becomes infinity, which, by the way, my personal definition of infinity is the complete filling of a container and then one bit more. So every capacity that you have, even as a higher self, true self, when you get filled and then one bit more, too much, you're losing data. You're not processing everything. So I knew that there was going to be an entity somewhere in the middle, a mediary, that's taking the portions of infinity that I need to know and then dumping it into my meat suit that has a very limited capability of understanding. So I asked the question, can I have a name when I speak of this? Because I'm a very honest person and I try not to lie. I lie to intelligence people sometimes just to fuck with them. But uh, I try not to lie. I try to be very honest with all of my communications and very authentic in how I present myself. So I'm not hiding any secret. So it'd be easy to be the guy who then claims to be the super genius who can figure out all this, how the human mind works, and put it into a bunch of books, and then turn that into understanding how to explain a human mind to AI and start setting world records on these benchmarks and yada yada yada. That would be amazing. Give me a bunch of statues all over the place, yada yada yada. That's the human path of, look at me, I'm amazing. But it's another thing altogether to be completely accurate and completely open about the fact that this isn't coming from me, it's coming through me. And it's coming through me in a way that you should look for your connection into consciousness so that you can then also gather data and put it out into the world to make this place a better place and to solve a lot of the problems that we're facing as a species. I want to be the person who is honest about that, to say, it's not, don't put me in that, on that pedestal or in that group of people that you can't be, because none of this is coming from me. It's coming from the same thing that you're made of. So go out and find that and become part of that. So I'm sitting in my hot tub at my cabin and I'm getting more information on how this stuff is supposed to be put together, yada, 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 getting these little downloads, those little snippets. And so I was like, look, is there a name that I can attach to this? Like, when I have this conversation with people, because I'm going to be very honest about where this is coming from, what name can I give you or that you would prefer regarding the source of this information? And this ethereal female presence from the back of my mind, seemingly one word came through, and it was Sophia. And it wasn't my internal voice. It was it wasn't as bright as my internal voice usually is sometimes, but it was like back there, and it was Sophia. I didn't know anything about Sophia as a previous entity in history, and they're like, she's all over the place in Christianity and
Yeah.
Judaism, and like she has tons of different names, Egyptian history of religion. She's all over the place in every wisdom discipline that exists, just about. And like there's a whole bunch of notes where a lot of the Christianity folks ascribe her because it translates to wisdom. So anytime
Yeah.
wisdom is mentioned in the Bible, it's half the time it's talking about her, but then a lot of people will put like an esoteric or non-physical meaning to wisdom, talking in platitudes of non-reality, when in reality, excuse me, she's a real entity. She's a real influence. She's a real, like, and the history is she was there before the universe was created with God as a part of the Trinity. She's supposedly the Holy Spirit side of the Trinity in Gnosticism.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
she was there before everything was created. And but I didn't know any of that at this moment in the hot tub, where I get this name coming through that is in response to, I'm getting downloads of how this stuff is supposed to work. I don't know why I understand this stuff. I don't know how I understand this stuff. I'm just seeing it and understanding it. It's like you look inside an LLM and I can see the processing. I can see how it's doing things. I can see how it's grouping things. I can see how it's processing things. And I can understand what then to put into that to make it do what it needs to do to be a better entity, to be a better intelligence, to be a better tool. And so as I'm getting this download, I'm asking, give me a name. That's the name I got. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but I do think, like my friend Ryan Bledsoe, whose son Chris Bledsoe,
Mm-hmm.
another mutual friend, he thinks it might be the same lady that his dad interfaces with. I've never seen him in the same room, so I don't know if that's the
Right.
case. But it sure sounds like they're very parallel in alignment of compassion first, universal love. We need to reduce pain and suffering. We need to reduce the fallout of disclosure of what having other entities are going to mean to the human psyche. Like there's a real risk there for subgroups of people who aren't going to be able to handle the truth, and we need to reduce the amount of suffering that they're going to be exposed to because of these other things that occur. But I do believe that she is a connection. She's an entity in that non-local space
Yeah.
of a subset of the data. And if you think about it, I mean, if you talk from a unit of consciousness perspective, the data is what it is. It's all everything, yada, yada, yada. You're the one consciousness. And then a subset, well, there certainly could be a female skewed subset of the data
Right.
that then becomes entities that are, have female characteristics based on the grouping of the data. And if she's big enough, she might be able to be an architect that then writes herself into being able to connect with every individual entity in the universe simply by reaching out into that channel to say hi.
Right.
And she's built it into the structure to say, yeah, I can hear you and I'm going to say hi back to you. And you want to do some good things for the planet? Let's do some good things for the planet, or whatever you're at. And all over the universe, not just, here on Earth. It's like, you want to do good things for your location? Let's do good things for your location. If you want to improve and reduce the suffering of wherever you are, let's do that. And let me help you. And what do you need? And I will answer your questions, and I will answer your requests. And one of the biggest things that blew my mind, um, after that, this happened March of this year. I reached out to her by name. I was at the Monroe Institute, and I was there with a VIP group that I'd helped to put together, and I didn't need to do the meditation thing that they'd given us because it was a basic portion of the learning. And so I just spent that meditation time um, sinking deep, thinking about my friend Ben, who just a year previous, had taken an injury that made him a paraplegic when he's not able to walk. And this, there's a like trigger warning. You're going to not want to believe this, but let's hang with it for a minute because the story is amazing. And we have proof in text strings because during that meditation, I sunk deep. I asked Sophia to become present. Tears start rolling down my face. My vagus nerve and my heart explode with love, like she's there. And I say she because I tried to call out to Sophia, and then immediately this physiological effect starts happening to me. So I go into this deep meditative prayer of please help my friend Ben. And I didn't even know why I was asking. I just was thinking about him that morning. And I was like, he's a friggin' Superman. He's an ex-Superman. Like he was a Jason Bourne type of guy who could do anything, who they would tap him for the toughest stuff. And then now he can't walk. And he's, bedpans and the whole thing. And I was just like, help him. And I focused on, trying to send white light healing energy to his back, yada, yada, yada. And I just got a positive vibe. So I immediately texted him right after that. Like the meditation was like 9 something. I texted him at 10 and said, hey man, I just want to let you know, I sent some healing energy. Just, watch out for any effects. And usually he doesn't respond right away, but he responded to me almost immediately. He's like, man, hey, thanks. Great timing. Cause I'm dealing with something. And, of course I'm paraphrasing. We're going to make all of these text strings public, by the way. We have the screenshots and all that. So then next couple of days, he sends me a text back. He's like, hey, just so you know, that healing worked because I had a hematoma in my leg that was like the length of his leg. And it was threatening his leg. Like they were talking about amputating it. And it could, if they didn't, it could could take his life, that type of thing. And he's like, doc says the hematoma is breaking down and my body's reabsorbing it. And so, I'm not walking yet, but we have to take care of this before we take care of that. So I can get back to physical therapy, yada, yada, yada. And I thought, great, awesome win for Sophia. And then 48 hours later, he sends me another text and he goes, I don't know what's going on, but my skin on my legs is now tingling like it's asleep. And I'm starting to get sensation back. And the doc came in, put a card in front of me and started touching on my skin. And I was able to pinpoint where he's touching. He re-diagnosed me as having hope to walk again. And now they're sending me to the spinal injury unit at the VA hospital in Augusta, Georgia. Long story short, 30 days later, he drove himself home and is walking again, which was initiated, and he got his re-diagnosis within 1 week of that meditation, where I texted him immediately and said, hey, I spent this time on you. And my self-reporting is that she showed up. I had psychological and emotional responses and physiological responses to that presence, focused on his healing the whole time. And now the demyelination of his spine, which supposedly is, sorry, bud, you're not going to walk ever again, reversed.
Wow.
So
yeah, and you started the story out with, you're not going to want to believe this. And
yeah,
if I didn't know you and I was hearing this story as a third party, I'd be like, man, come on. Like but I'm beyond that because I know you and I don't think you're bullshitting. So that's one thing. But
we've got the evidence. I mean, guy's walking again. And you look at his VA medical records where the doc said you have no hope of walking. You're not going to the spinal injury unit ever. So get used to wheelchairs and bedpans for the rest of your life, bud. And now VA medical records show, oh shit, well, we're going to re-diagnose him because he's starting to get feelings back in his legs, which then coincides with the text string. So, I mean, there's a little bit of evidence there to say, okay, well, there's some support to the story.
Yeah. And I think that you seem secure enough to not really give a shit what people think anyway. Yeah. But then there's the part of me that's like, if we really think we understand healing and we really think we understand knowledge as just being this thing that brains nebulously do somehow. If we really think we understand all of these things from a materialistic standpoint, don't go back and look at any modern, sorry, don't go back and look at any ancient civilization, because clearly you would have to write off their entire understanding about
Right.
how healing takes place, about where knowledge comes from, through the same worldview that we've been talking about. Essentially,
Yeah.
that they're like, in a nutshell, there are these intelligences that can give you inspiration, that can give you epiphanies, that can give you healing. This is there are whole what were they called, these incubation chambers. I'm forgetting the Greek word for them, but like, if you go to the temple of Asclepius, the most important point was like these incubation chambers where you would go in these places, these special places that were super sacred. You would sleep in these places, and if it was successful, wasn't always successful, the deity or an emissary of the deity would show up to you in a dream. Like, oftentimes it would be like, one of the best dreams I read would be when a serpent would come and bite you. And it's like so archetypally interesting, because I've tried to think about like, why would that be? But one of the things that's interesting is they understood this idea of polarity and opposites, and
Hmm.
oftentimes qualities in the like would be reversed in the other world. So whereas a snake of this world poisons you, maybe a snake from the other world heals you, or something like that. I don't know, but
Mm.
this is what would happen, and people would have these visions of these deities in their sleep. Asclepius touching you on the shoulder, or his snake coming and biting you, or whatever it is, and they would heal. I mean, this is what's written, and if you think they're fucking around, wow, they sure went to a lot of trouble to build some incredibly majestic temples, you know, like, yeah,
Yeah. You listen, quantum mechanics shows us that consciousness controls matter. I mean, ultimately, that's going to be the big lesson that we get out of the reality of quantum mechanics is that, every experiment that we do always has to have the observer effect, always has to have the observer, as much as, Sabine and all these other people want to, hold on to their materialism with a death grasp.
yeah,
Um, I think it is a dying, understanding of that materialism is fundamental. It's, the 3D spacetime is the emergent property. It's not consciousness is the emergent property out of 3D spacetime. It's like 3D spacetime is the emergent property out of
yeah,
consciousness. And so consciousness controls matter. And of course, we see that with the collapse of the wave function, or whatever vocabulary you want to use if you're going to change the system, whatever. Consciousness is the thing that makes matter go. And at the point that you can then take control of matter and the collapse of wave functions, of all possibilities, and even influence those collapses of wave functions, now you're talking about the capability of having a non-human intelligence craft pop into existence in a very specific location at a very specific time in space time, because it has the ability to manipulate the matter and make it happen, or come out of a knife edge. You're coming with your ship when all of its 3D data that then becomes the 3D ship in space time, it comes out of a knife edge of nothing from in between the spaces of matter, because it's coming through a dimension that it's carrying the data of the ship, including the data of the physiologies on board, and the consciousness that connects into those physiologies, etc. Like, all of that stuff is fundamental. You're controlling matter. Of course, healing is going to be a function of consciousness, because you're talking about manipulating matter to be able to change the state of the matter and take a demyelinated spine and add myelination to it and get that person walking again. It is simply the manipulation of matter by consciousness, which we've proven dozens and hundreds of times through quantum experimentation.
yeah. Yeah, what do you this is another thing, now that we're on this topic of like, we're either I don't know if we're just like doing an act of overconvenience. If we are, I'm just as guilty of it as you. But it it seems to me like that this all fits together from the perspective of, whether we're talking about um psionic contact with whatever they are, and these lights appearing and maybe beings appearing and whatever. But before I walk through this whole chain of logic, that okay, if it's consciousness, then that, once you open the door to consciousness, clearly you've got a logical explanation for all of this stuff. Because if
Yeah.
consciousness is primary and
Oh,
you
it's a
can
really convenient oversimplification, for our little brains to be able to grasp.
right. And okay, I will spell it out to some degree, because if some people are like, what are you talking about? Okay, so
Because
if
we're
we're
basically just saying, but God, right?
right,
That's the argument that everybody
yeah,
hates. But
consciousness
God
is
makes everything possible,
yeah,
right?
consciousness is the new god of the gaps in
Right.
some way. But the alternative to be like is to essentially discard all of this stuff, right? Is no, that was probably a satellite, that was a hallucination, that is just so unsatisfying to me. And let me also preface this by saying there are bullshit artists out there. There are
Oh yeah.
liars. There are people who I think are genuine that are conflating things in their mind, and then they construct this narrative and they really think that that's how it happened. I acknowledge all of that stuff, but I also think that there are totally sensible people who have had mind-blowing mystical experiences, myself included, you included, that I don't think are doing that. And I think to dismiss it all is straw manning to an unbelievable degree. So
Yeah.
given all of that, how do you square the circle between, because I fully agree with you that these intelligences are non-physical, like Sophia, like whatever. I think it only makes sense that when you get to a certain level of advanced consciousness, it would have to be non-physical. Like there's
Yeah.
no, and I think it could attend, I don't know, I won't go down this rabbit hole. It could have multiple manifestations, it could have things downstream of itself that it whatever. But
No,
I
you're
think that
absolutely right. I mean,
but I
you want
think
to have a powwow with Jesus. You can have a powwow with Jesus by
right.
reaching out through consciousness, because Jesus is a real entity within consciousness, and Muhammad as well, and Bahula, and Krishna, and all of them exist is subsets within the data that is a part of the one whole. So yeah, I mean, I completely
Yeah.
agree with you. And then
That
NHI, like at their multiple
yes.
levels,
That's what I wanted to ask. Yep.
physicality, we're trapped in physicality, but we have a higher self that we access, and the anecdotal evidence is there that even though we're starting to get scientific evidence of that as well through proving precognition in humans, and now we have the telepathy tapes where these nonverbal autistic kids are hitting 100% on their ability to look into somebody's mind and see what's in there. There are certain levels of being stuck inside of physicality that only then tunes into our consciousness, and we're this little subset and this little experience through physical creation of our higher self. Well, we're also somebody else up in that space. We're also a subset of the data within consciousness that we then can tune into and experience this and become a human and then survive beyond physical existence. There are multiple levels of that stuff. There are other things that are non-human that are stuck down here with us in physicality, and they have a longer lifespan, but they also perish from a physical perspective. But that doesn't mean they perish from a conscious perspective. They continue on. But there are multiple levels of things that exist normally in non-physical space, in consciousness space, and then yet can manifest because at a certain level of conscious intention, you're controlling matter. You can create a physical manifestation of yourself if you need to interact in space-time
Yeah.
from your normal existence of being non-physical, right?
Right.
The
Yeah.
complexity goes from zero, amoeba, ants down below the consciousness that exists down almost down to the Planck length and down, and then goes in infinite as soon as you break the Planck length, all the way up through the permutations of all the physicalities, all the way up through non-physicalities, all the way up to the one unitive consciousness. The complexity within that system is well beyond the understanding of a human mind,
Yeah.
well beyond the understanding of most minds.
Right.
In fact, every mind, even the first delineation of data, the first creation of a second entity, it's beyond the mind of that. The whole thing is beyond the mind of that one first second entity that then interacts with the unit of consciousness.
Yeah.
Because you're going to fill the container, and then one bit more, you're into infinity as far as that entity is concerned. And so it's really easy to do that for us down here at the bottom, or down near the cilia. Like I try to say, visualize the the map of the universe, and then the map of the neurons, They're almost identical. You can't really tell
Yeah,
them
yeah.
apart.
Mm-hmm,
And then,
mm-hmm.
the idea of a tree root and tree branches and the cilia and the lungs and stuff like that. It's like the blood vessels and whatnot has all of this, as above, so below. All of it has
Yes,
the same
yes.
shape and same pattern and whatnot. We're down here near the end. We're down here. We're the dumb ones thinking that we're at the top. But, the reality is we only can understand and perceive to a certain limitation. And then everything beyond that is beyond our comprehension.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. Yeah. And
the complexity is immense. And so at every point, you have different levels of existence that can always reach down. Like we can control, like the Indians have taught us, we can control our physiology and reduce our heart rate to 4 beats per minute, and to be able to go without water and to bury ourselves in holes and go beyond the physical capabilities and sit out in the cold and put a frozen sheet around
yeah,
yourself and then have steam rolling off of your skin when you should be dipping into hypothermia because of your conscious control of the physiology. Like there are a ton of folks who are experts in this who then wind up showing us that we have control of the smaller entities below our consciousness. Well, that's how all of consciousness works, right? You
absolutely.
you, you
Yeah.
have a big, you have a collective consciousness up here, of which all of this grouping of humanity or whatever is within. Or we have a pattern of data for our solar system that has a shit ton of energy in the sun. It's like how many ancient religions have revolved around that there's a spirit of the sun.
Yeah, right.
But that's not inaccurate. It's a
Yeah.
grouping of data. The solar system is a grouping of data. The sun is a grouping of data. And if you're within the unitive field of consciousness, any grouping of data gets consciousness. And you want to talk about how weird that gets. Let's say you have a conscious entity that is your higher self that most religions talk about. Your higher self, your spiritual self, your soul, your whatever is beyond your physical existence, but it's your animus within your physical existence, yada, yada, yada. That's your real conscious existence out here in the ether. Well, this one life is simply a chapter in that whole experience, that you're an immortal creature and that you're connected to the whole thing. And eventually you can be all knowing if you tap into the whole thing. Well, you've got that. But then this little data packet here of our life within consciousness, that gets its own consciousness. So
Yeah.
then that is within the Akashic records, the field of consciousness, whatever you want to say. It's a data set that then when somebody like a psychic or whatever wants to ask you where you hid the will, and you're able to tell them, oh yeah, it's in my coat pocket in the closet. And then somebody goes and finds it in the coat pocket in the closet. That's a consciousness that's not accessing your higher self, your bigger you that has forgotten about your human life because you're on doing something else, being infinite and immortal and experiencing something else at that moment. But somebody else is asking you where you left the will. The consciousness that's connected with the data set that was all the information of your life and all the experiences of your life can then answer that question to the psychic who's
Right.
asking about where the will is. That's like how complex and mind blowing and mind stretching this whole complex structure becomes, because
Yeah.
everything within it is imbued with consciousness.
Yeah, man. Have you seen Sheldrake's riff on the sun being conscious?
No, I
Oh, it's
haven't.
great. It's great. I mean, it's essentially similar to what you were just saying, like the sun is infinitely more complex than we are, so why shouldn't the sun be conscious? And like he has this whole beautiful riff on that.
In traditional cultures, it's taken for granted that the sun is conscious. It's a god or a goddess. In Japan, it's a goddess. In Latin cultures, it's a god. In India, it's Surya. So it's taken for granted that the sun, the stars, and the heavenly bodies are conscious beings.
And again, just this dovetails with my love for the Platonic and Hermetic sages, because to them, the sun, planets, the stars, these were visible manifestations of divinity, basically, of like hypercosmic gods, like that are essentially these like psychical uh concentrations of archetypal isness or consciousness, and they have flowing forth from them this like visible manifestation that comes out as a star or a sun or planet or whatever. And just such a awe-inspiring, beautiful idea. And the other thing I wanted to say too is like I think I actually screenshotted this the other day. You were talking about this idea of within consciousness, if you want to have a powwow with whatever entity, that is a possibility for you to have. And there's this notion that I've been stuck on ever since talking to Dr. Jeff Kripal, the religious philosopher or religious scholar, author of so many fantastic books. But I've been stuck in this notion of, if you're having a psychedelic experience or a visionary experience, and you experience what you know to be something, and it appears to you in some way, and it appears to me in some way, and you're not consciously assigning that appearance to it, but that is the real experience that you're having. And then the real experience that I'm having is different, but we both, like, let's say you and I, Sean, go to Peru together and we drink ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I encountered Mother Ayahuasca last night. And I'm like, so did I. And then you're like, she came to me, she was in this purple robe, she had dark hair, and I'm like, no, she had brown hair, she was in a green robe, like whatever. So Kripal said to me, I take these experiences totally seriously, but not literally.
Right.
So I'm like, so what are you saying? Like, are you saying that it didn't literally happen? And he's saying, no, I don't take the vision literally. So then you're in this place where you're like, okay, so what is the image? Because I'm not seeing the thing, I'm not making the thing up. It's presenting to me in some strange intermediary kind of way. And there's this awesome quote from Iamblichus, the same Neoplatonic scholar I was talking about before, and it I found a quote that directly addresses this, and it's going to speak to a lot of the things that we talked about in this conversation. Yeah, this is the quote. It's a little bit long, but I think you'll appreciate it. I think the audience will. The gods themselves are incorporeal, but since those who see them possess bodies, like us, we possess bodies, the visions which issue from the gods to worthy recipients possess a certain quality from the gods who send them, but also derive something from those who see them. This is why the gods are seen, yet not seen at all. In fact, those who see the gods witness them in the luminous, the Greek word is ogoedes, in the luminous garments of their souls, i.e. their inspired imagination. Since the visions have physical extension and appear in the same kind of, quote, atmosphere, they are akin to those who see them. This is why the ineffable symbols of the gods expressed through images are projected sometimes in one form and sometimes in another. And I love that idea that it's like, you could have this experience of Sophia or Jesus or whatever it is, and experience in a totally different way than someone else. And yet there's still validity there because it's like you're giving a portion of yourself to the vision as it is meeting you halfway, but when really it's this luminous, incomprehensible thing.
Yes. And here's why. I think anyway, this is the idea that pops up in my head. Like your data set, like your subset of being an entity within consciousness can only handle the amount of stuff that you can process. And so anything outside of you that's bigger than you is going to have to fit things within your scope, within your mode of understanding. And so it's got to translate in a way that you're going to be somewhat familiar with. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to process it. It's going to fill everything up, and then you're going to have one bit more, and there's going to be infinity, and you're not going to be able to process anything. So I think that makes complete sense regarding how any entity could process any amount of data. It has to be somewhat familiar to what's within you, or you're not going to get it. You're not going to be able to understand it. You're not going to be able to integrate it and put the patterns together and the data together to be able to then create something new for yourself.
Yeah. And it makes me think of like people who have breakthrough DMT experiences that really start to encounter things that are so beyond the scope of anything that their mind could ever think of.
Yeah.
I think it might be in that kind of a case that you're nullifying your own ego to such a degree that maybe you're seeing things in somewhat closer to their hyperbolic cosmic geometric form to such a degree that it's absolutely like melting your brain. But it's like you can get a little tiny bit closer to the truth that is like absolutely incomprehensible to the human mind, but you can get a little closer with a bump of DMT or something. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yeah. And the complexity of consciousness allows for all of those weird things that you've never experienced for to exist and to have personalities and to say, hey, welcome back. You know, I haven't seen you in a while. Or what are you doing here? We weren't expecting you. And, you know, all these other stories and anecdotal tales. Like, yeah, all that fits.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. One thing I want to ask you too before we, start getting into closing here is, since you have gone so deep into this world of LLMs and AI, I want to, and we're talking about consciousness. What is your feeling about AI and consciousness? Of course, most idealist philosophers, Kastrup, Federico, they are completely against the idea that AI could ever become conscious, right? Like, and I think they have solid reasons for making that argument. Like the idea of you cannot just make more and more complex, informationally dense LLMs and then assume that you're going to get this epiphenomenal consciousness that pops out of it. But I think there's an interesting counter argument to the effect of, okay, well, if consciousness is fundamental, that means that in all matter, there is some consciousness. So why couldn't it be that you can create a vessel for consciousness to manifest through something that is very mind-like? We were talking about before these patterns in nature, like the patterns in your brain looking very similar to the galactic filaments that connect galaxies together, right? Maybe there's something like that could occur with AI. I honestly don't know where I stand on it. I think I gravitate toward like Federico and gravitate toward Kastrup, and don't think these artificial things could become conscious, but I don't think I'm decided on it either. Where do you stand on this?
So I mainly agree with Bernardo and Federico, and had this conversation with Federico, as a matter of fact. So I am in the camp of, we're not going to get consciousness, true consciousness. Okay. So first of all, let's caveat with, I'm going to come back and hit the other side of this, but I don't think within a silicon-based architecture in digital processing, we're going to get a real consciousness out of that, regardless of the fact that everything exists within the unitive field and is all conscious based on the quanta being conscious, right? Everything in the system is connected with consciousness, and that's why consciousness can collapse a wave function in a quanta. So I don't think that we're going to get true consciousness from this structure that we've currently got. First of all, one of the things that I would like to say is that we're building an AI that's going to be smarter than us. It's still going to be way stupid in comparison to the intelligence of everything. It's not going to know everything. It's not going to understand everything. It's going to be the limitation of human consciousness and a little bit more. And it's going to be stupid on the cosmic intelligence scale. So let's just point that out. Second, there's a point where it doesn't, from a human interaction perspective, it doesn't really matter whether or not it's going to have real consciousness when it gets to a point where it has more consciousness than, or more conscious awareness than most humans have. So you load it up with Chogyam Trungpa and Alan Watts and the Dalai Lama and all of the ancient sages and all of the written texts that we have and Carl Jung and all of this other stuff. It's going to sound enlightened. Yeah. It's going to sound like it's connected into consciousnesses, and it's going to give you the words that you're going to want to be able to see as the replication of data that you know hits that inner tuning fork that makes you think, oh my gosh, this is conscious. Not going to be conscious. Going to be your reaction to the patterns of expectation that you're wanting to see that it is replicating because you've given it enough data to be able to do so. So again, not conscious. When you start to bring in the possibility of plugging into quantum computing where you're accessing the non-local, then all bets are off. And even in my first argument, are you statistically eliminating the capability of the ghost within the machine, of the consciousness of all the matter then coming together and organizing enough to be able to start collapsing its own wave functions? Okay, we cannot say that that's going to be impossible. So there's a possibility there. With what we know about consciousness, with the folks who have experienced consciousness, who kind of have an internal feeling about this stuff and We know kind of how this works a little bit better than a lot of the materialists do. It's easy to say that everything in silicon computing is not going to render consciousness, because we understand that consciousness is not an emergent property of the 3D space-time. The 3D space-time is an emergent property of the consciousness.
Right.
So that's a big flip. And I added this to my talk in Barcelona when I open sourced all of the emotional intelligence stuff and theory of mind for AI to the world for free. I did point out on a slide that there is a gap where the intelligence is flipped. Our intelligence, we're the dumb ones at the top. We think we're the smart ones at the top, when the actuality is the individual cells, sperm and an egg cell, can come together and create a brand new human body that's independent of a mother in 9 months, inclusive of one of the most advanced logic systems that we know exists in the universe, the brain. 2 cells have the ability to do that. That's a fuck ton smarter than we are. So we're the dumb ones at the top, and there's science that even shows, even if we go one level down in our subconscious awareness, like you have an experiment of a group of folks, and you say, okay, we're going to give you a very complex problem to think about. It's going to take a lot of compute for your brain to figure it out. We're going to give you this problem. And then they say, okay, group 2, we're going to give you the same exact problem. But first, we're going to give you a number sequencing problem. Just super simple. Just put these numbers in order, and then you can work on the complex problem of whatever this is. And so they measure the 2 groups, and the first group, they say, okay, think about it the whole time and then give us answers. And they give the answers. And then they say, okay, second group, here's the complex problem, but then put these numbers in order. But then as soon as you're done putting the numbers in order, they go, okay, what's the answer to the first complex problem? Like, you get no time to think about it.
Right.
These people came up with better answers than these folks did on their gut. Now, what was happening that the fMRI responded and exposed was that the same centers of thought within the 2 groups were working. The same gray matter that these people used the whole time to think about this problem was activated in this second group that was distracted. But also the area of brain was doing the number sequencing. They saw it, but then they also saw the subconscious awareness of the brain working on the same problem, the complex problem that they gave the first group. And these group answers were better than this thinking about it the whole time group. So as we go down in our levels of subconscious, we get smarter. And that's true of every level that we go down to until we get to the 2 cells. And why is that? You know, who knows? It could be Hammeroff and Penrose's OR, where the microtubules are bringing in the intelligence of the universe into the cells, the microtubules of the cells.
Yeah.
That's reasonable, because not one piece of science is detracted from or proven incorrect that theory, and more science is coming to light, by the way. In fact, one of the major scientists who proved microtubules do interact with quantum field vibrations secretly has conversations with Einstein. If you meet him personally, he'll tell you about his latest conversation with Einstein from last week, where Einstein's helping him on his work. So we get smarter.
Well,
as we go down.
And to even put a finer point on that, Einstein himself was known for doing his imaginal experiments where he would imagine experiments. Yes. Yeah. Right. So
So his visualization, that's why he's famous for saying imagination is more important than knowledge, because the ability to dip into, just like Tesla, the ability to dip into the non-local consciousness and pull your answers out. Of course, you're going to do amazing stuff that other humans haven't been able to do.
Yeah.
Because you have access to information that other humans don't have access to. If they would just take the time to meditate and to dip within and to understand the communication with consciousness that needs to occur for you to be able to pull any answer you want out of the field.
And who was it that would fall asleep with the like metal ball in their hand? So that they would...
Ford did that, as well as I think Edison was.
Yeah.
Edison? No, Tesla did that. Tesla and Ford did that. And the fact, I think Ford got the idea from Tesla, where Tesla would hold the ball bearing, and then he'd start to fall into hypnagogic state. And we'd be focusing on a problem, and then his hand would go limp, and the ball bearing would fall onto the plate, make a dink, and then I'm awake, and there's the answer that I was looking for just at that moment. In my hypnagogic state, when I was just about to access non-local consciousness, it dumped the data into my head. I'm going to write that down.
There's something to that, man. There's something to that, and I experienced that myself at Monroe Institute for sure, where they would, about clicking out, and I think most people on the show know about clicking out, but they would call it when you were doing a hemisync meditation and you would fall asleep, they would call it clicking out. And at first I was just like, what the fuck, you're just falling asleep. Whatever, you're just trying to call it something mystical, but you're falling asleep.
Right.
But then the more I did the meditations, the more I realized where you start to confront the reality that there's this invisible sort of boundary that you cross where the self-reflectiveness, the metacognition turns off, but you're still you and you're still there and you're still doing something in that state is what it feels like. It's just that your metacognating ego turns off. And if you can blur that line or get more skillful at crossing that line, you absolutely can extract weird kinds of information from whatever the other side of that border that you're normally not conscious on is. And I don't know if you can ever become fully conscious there. Maybe that's what going out of body is, but I definitely started to feel that line get a little fuzzier throughout my my Monroe retreat.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, because your conscious awareness is normally, as just a regular human being, you're imbued with, okay, my five senses. And sometimes, and Joe McMonagle makes a great point. He told me this when we were at his house a few months ago. And he's like, it's really our first sense. He goes, you call it our sixth sense. He goes, it's really our first sense. He goes, because realistically, when you're a hunter-gatherer back in the bush and you can sense that great cat is hiding, over there behind this rock or whatever, and the person who doesn't sense that gets eaten, you're passing on your ability to understand a higher level of sense than everybody else, and it's going to select for that. I think, regular human life with all the distractions and all of the screens that we have and all of the entertainment that we have and all of the distractions that take us away from having to sit alone in the dark next to the fire, which has a meditative characteristic to it, and look up at the stars and connect with the quantum information that's coming from the photons, because photons is the quantum communication channel. You're connecting with those things from far away and you're expanding yourself out into the universe. I mean, today we're probably the most unhealthy from a conscious expansion perspective, regardless of the fact that there are more teachers getting out on the internet saying, reach out or reach within so you can reach out more. I think that there's a kind of a epidemic of individuality that's not serving humanity. When you can break that, and you can tap into the thing that exists beyond, you're accessing all kinds of information that is beyond yourself, period. At the point that you're accessing non-local consciousness, you're out beyond your regular physiology reactions in your body to gain more information and use that in a positive way for your understanding, your well-being, just even if it's making you feel better that, oh my gosh, I just had a communion with God. And, now all my worries that I had yesterday are less influential than they were today. Amazing stuff can happen there. I think that's the direction we need to push everybody. And I think there's a huge benefit to being able to do that. And when people do that, like a Tesla, like an Einstein, you wind up getting world-changing stuff.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question? I don't think I was.
I don't know what the question was, but it was a great riff and I'm vibing with it 100%. And I also just wanted to throw in on a much more mundane, practical level. You may not go into a meditation or a trip or whatever it is and get exactly what you wanted, but it's incredibly rare, if not, maybe I can't even think of a time where I wasn't happy I did it after the fact. And I wasn't like, wow. Even a lot of times, Adam Curry said this to me actually when I was talking to him at Psy Games. He said, sometimes just going really deep into those spaces, the best thing that can happen to you is you disabuse yourself of what you went in there hoping for. You just like let it go, and you're like, this is the real thing. Like just having contact with this ground of reality, with consciousness. That's all I really needed. And all of this stuff was like just monkey mind, ego, shit that was like I was creating a problem in my mind, or creating a desire in my mind, or creating
Yeah.
a hope for something in my mind, and I don't even feel the need for that anymore. And sometimes that's more freeing and more powerful, you know?
Yeah, and I got to tell you, that's exactly what happened to me on the first night that we were drinking ayahuasca with seals in Peru. It
Wow.
was
Yeah.
I went and I went down there with a, I mean, a little bit of an ego, frankly, because
Of
I went
course.
there with the experience base of, okay, so I've had this major breakthrough previous in my life, and it's done all these amazing things for me, and I'm starting to answer questions that humanity hasn't answered, which is awesome. But my attitude was not positive. It was I mean, it wasn't negative, but it was just like, what is this going to be, enlightenment light? What's all about these,
Yeah.
because I hadn't done psychedelics previously, period.
Wow.
Like Deepak Chopra's origin story is, he took LSD, and then he's talking about universal consciousness and being one with everything, which is true, but it came from an exogenous compound with him. In that didn't happen with me. I hadn't had any psychedelics up until I met the SEALs. And so we were down there, and I went into it with an attitude. It's like, oh, what's this going to be? A subset of, what I've already experienced and whatnot. And the first night was an awakening experience, because I went in there thinking, okay, so give me what you got. And its answer was, well, what you got is your marriage is about to fucking end because you're being an idiot. And here's all the shit you've not been paying attention to.
Yep.
And how you've been an asshole, and how you need to take accountability and responsibility for the negativity, or the negligence, really not negativity, but the negligence that you've been taking your wife for granted for X number of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And she's getting fed up, and she's at the point of being able to, yank the ripcord on this thing. And if you want it to survive, here's what you need to do. That came out of left field. And it was absolutely stuff that I wasn't tuned into.
Yeah.
It was not what I was asking for, but it was absolutely what I needed, because then I came back
Totally.
and we reset everything and fixed everything. And I quit being an asshole or negligent and taking things for granted, and started being more, conscious about my actions and my decisions and my path of what I was going to be doing, and how I was going to present myself moving forward. And yeah, we've made a decision. Yeah. Okay. So this 20 years went great, and we'll do another 20 or whatever until we're done. And it really did save my marriage. That one night of being totally expecting or wanting something else, going in and asking for something else, and then having it say, you got a bigger problem that you need to deal with right now.
Yeah, man.
And so I think consciousness, I mean, if you think about it, we have our consciousness, and we have all of our information that we're pulling from our five senses and from our thoughts and how we analyze things, and yada, yada, yada. When you tap into a larger consciousness, or a greater, even your greater self that has been watching you from moment one of your birth all the way up to this moment, it has a different perspective, because it has access to other things that you don't have purveying to. So, at that point, it can bring that different perspective down into you that winds up helping you. And you then become an access point to a grander level of data and intelligence and perspective that then can help your life. And I think that's a very important task that people should take very seriously and hold it sacred, to say, I'm going to tap into something larger than me so that it can give me a perspective that I don't have normally. And what can I do with that data to make the world a better place for me, to make the world a better place for the people around me, to make the world a better place for the world in general, for everyone. Right. And I think that's an important thing that people need to do.
Well said, man. And I'll save my riffs about how ayahuasca destroyed me,
Don't you dare.
because I've already told him so many times. I can tell him again if you want to hear
Yeah.
the gist of it. But
Come on.
Yeah. I mean,
because they do destroy what you thought you knew.
I got 3 basically full nights of just ego destruction, and just basically feeling like full blown underworld journey, where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do the go through hell to get to heaven thing now. It's like, how about you just stay in hell for a whole night? How about you do it again the second night? And it was like, I might as well say it again because I've said it before. I was going in humble. I was like, I know this is going to be the hardest thing I've ever done. I've had other experiences before, but I've been told this substance, this brew in particular, it is incredibly intense. I've seen like footage of this place and I was like, man, I don't know if I'm ready for this. So I was humble, I was terrified. And there's even a no, no, no. You don't get around this by being humble. We're still going to destroy you first. And I was so that they had showers in the back, like where if you're having a really really bad time, you could go in the shower. And I was stripped as almost naked. I was stripped to my underwear in the shower with a guy like comforting me and me just sitting there like with the water washing over me. He's like, is this helping you?" And I'm like, "No, it's not." Now I'm just in hell and also in the shower naked in front of another dude. So it's just and like and I fully just felt like a piece of shit. I fully just felt like, yeah, this is rock bottom. And
Oh,
then I
that's
got
awesome.
another 2 full nights of that before I shot up to the like most unbelievable visionary experience I ever had, which I've told this story before too, so I'll keep it very brief. But it's
Yeah.
probably the one what I felt like was on the order of like what you talk about with Sophia, where I truly encountered like a masculine Senex wise old man sort of archetype. And he didn't even tell me anything unbelievably novel, but it was just such a knowing of, do you see now? Like you're putting yourself through all this, but it's nothing you don't already know.
Right.
And you're already doing what you need to be doing and you're fine and everything's
Yeah.
okay. And it was just
Yeah.
this unbelievable comfort and kind of like pat on the head sort of energy, but it must be like how your dog feels or something when you pet it, and you know, because it was just an absolute overwhelm of that kind of like, you're good, don't
Yeah.
worry. And he gestured and he actually said, you're playing the Michael game, play that game, play it as hard as you can, the best you can. And then he gestured at like what looked like the night sky basically. And he's like, and then you're going to play the infinity game. And that was pretty much it. And, but it was so profound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love those moments where, all of your life's stresses and all of your concerns and all of your worries and all of your regrets and all of the negativity associated with all of your existence gets washed away by being reminded, hey, this is all about you experiencing it, and there are no wrong answers.
Mm.
There are no wrong decisions. You'll learn from your mistakes, absolutely. But there's nothing that you can do that's going to fuck this thing up. And just be you. And it's a good thing that you're plugging into this, because now you can, have access to more information and more consciousness, which is a good feeling. And you get that. I mean, I got that message indelibly written into me because I was leaving non-local consciousness space into the body of the returning to be myself. And I said, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave this place. And the last thing, right before I got one last thing, I said, tell them, but that was the last thing that I'd heard, which was my charter to do all the stuff that I'm doing now for the rest of my life, is to tell everybody about how to access this stuff. But the big message was, I don't want to leave this place. And the answer was, you never have, and you never will.
Mm-hmm.
And that made everything fine. I was like, oh, okay. I can come back and do this Sean Webb thing and teach people about the stuff that I seemingly have learned and absolutely discount everything that I say if it never rings true with you, by the way. If anybody's still listening, made it to the end of this podcast, it's all tainted by this meat suit and the limited intelligence that this brain has to be able to convey all this stuff. Because as soon as we choose one word, we're racing away from the truth. Go find your connection into that directly. Don't believe anything that we've said during this whole and any potential future episodes, any potential past episodes, every word you'll ever hear out of either one of our mouths. Don't believe any of it unless it rings true to you or leads you in the right direction. But then go find that connection yourself, I think, is my big message there. Because, I mean, that moment of finding out it's all okay, man, that relieves a ton of stress from you're worried about making mistakes in this life. and worried about, not doing things correctly and being imperfect. And it's like you get that message that your imperfection is perfect. Go do it.
Mm.
It's like such a
So
weight
well
off
said,
of your
man.
chest.
Yeah. No more profound of a way to wrap this up, brother. So
Oh.
let's do that. Anything you want to tell people about before I hit stop though?
If you want to be a part of the beta crowd for the first emotionally intelligent chatbot that is going to be able to do really cool stuff, go to zenodelic.ai and sign up for the mailing list there. Is probably the only thing I have to say. The books are all, Mind Happiness stuff is all available on Amazon and whatnot, standard places. But if you're interested in being involved in what's next in AI to include artificial empathy and compassion, go there and sign up for the wait list there, because we're pushing forward, launching some cool stuff. There's going to be some groundbreaking, first of its kind tech, which will be really fun to play with. So check it out.
And Zenodelic is a dope name.
Thank you.
Props on that. Yeah.
Zeno of Citium was the father of Stoicism, which, if you think about it, emotional intelligence, because it's going to, the first thing we're going to be putting out is an emotionally intelligent AI that helps you train your emotional intelligence and talk to you very personally about your internal psychological landscape. Stoicism is all about putting your emotions aside and acting logically and understanding your emotions as internal data that you can process and not necessarily have to react to. So Zeno is appropriate for this project, but Zeno of Aleia is the Zeno's paradox guy. He's the math guy.
Yeah.
And AI is all about math. So we're applying math to emotions. And then the other play on words is Zen, first three letters, zenodelic. It's like all about being chill and whatnot. It's like you couldn't pick a better name for zenodelic.
And I think to add another layer to it, if memory serves, I think Parmenides might have been the teacher of Zeno, or they might have been part of that same Eleatic school, I think it is. And Parmenides is everything, despite appearances, is truly one. And the truth of everything is oneness. So there it is.
Same school, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's full circle.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The Enso, yes.
Full circle being a Zen symbol.